unless we start working towards a more gender neutral framework, many people are going to be left out of, they're not going to have the space to be able to get justice. So we really need to make our laws gender neutral. Otherwise, we are not getting very far.
In many ways, Anjali Gopalan has been a torchbearer for the LGBTQIA+ community. She started Naz Foundation in 1994 to lead a dedicated fight against HIV/AIDS issues and defend those marginalised due to their sexuality. Naz Foundation is the original petitioner to challenge Section 377, criminalising homosexuality, an archaic law which was struck down by the Supreme Court 4 years back. Honoring a persistent fight for equality, she has received the Knight of the Legion of Honor, one of the highest honors from the French government in 2013, shortlisted for the Nobel Peace Prize in 2005, named one of Time magazine's most influential people in the world in 2012, and received the Woman Achiever Award from the Indian government in 2007. Join us as we talk about the way forward for the Indian queer community. Hello, Ms. Anjali. Welcome to Maharani Talks. It's so lovely to have you on the podcast.
Happy to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
It's totally my pleasure, ma'am. So in September, it's been exactly 4 years since a momentous judgment, with the Supreme Court striking down part of the Section 377 criminalising homosexuality. Could you share that moment with us? What was going through your mind and what was the reaction like?
I still, when I think of it, I get goosebumps. I remember when we first started, which was in 2001, when we first filed.
Yeah.
And it's incredible because I remember going through that whole period thinking, this is not going to happen during my lifetime. Somehow, I was so sure it wouldn't happen because the way things were going. So it's just incredible that it's happened. If you think about it, it's nothing but just decriminalizing, right? The community is no longer seen as criminals. They still don't have any rights.
True.
But the very fact that homosexuality has been decriminalized means a lot to the community and to society at large. So the response of society is also changing because of that.
Yeah. And you were, of course, a big part of it. And like you said, in reality, your journey started way back in 2001 when Naz Foundation originally filed the petition in Delhi High Court.
Right.
Sadly, the Supreme Court overturned it in 2013. It must have been a roller coaster ride for you and the others involved.
It was unbelievable. It was unbelievable that the Supreme Court would set aside one of the best judgments that we have seen in many decades. When you read that judgment, you really understand how wonderful some of our judges are and can be. So to set that aside made no sense. There was no logic in it.
True, yeah. But when the Supreme Court quashed that judgment, did it feel it was all for naught? Did that original Delhi High Court judgment become a huge catalyst for the movement? Did you think it made a difference?
Huge difference, because without that, you see what happened with the Delhi High Court judgment, a couple of things. One is, which I think are major. One is that no longer could we as a society sweep homosexuality under the carpet and say, this is a Western phenomenon, it doesn't exist here, this is not who we are. And the other thing is, it also allowed for, and this happened, many young people started coming out.
Yeah.
And so it was, in a manner of speaking, the horse had bolted from the stable. Much as the Supreme Court wanted to push them back into the closet, it didn't happen. They couldn't make it happen. So I think that is what allowed for it to finally get ripped up. Without that, I think it would have been very difficult.
That's true. How did the community take it when the Supreme Court did that in 2013?
I know a lot of people went literally into depression because it was unbelievable. It was unbelievable that the highest court in the land would say, yes, it's against our moral values, it's against our religious beliefs. Those were the arguments used.
Yeah.
It's crazy. It's crazy. We're a democracy. We still deny rights to the community, but to even continue to wanting to criminalize them, It just didn't make sense, any of it, right?
Yeah.
And also the fact that Delhi High Court judgment allowed for people to feel secure in the fact of who they were. And that was an argument that could be used with families, because families are usually the problem. I think when I look at society, I always feel it is the first block that we face is from families. So that was an argument that could be used to families that, look, the courts are also saying that we are not criminals. So now the family again goes back to saying, oh, but the court is saying you're very much what they said you were earlier. So yeah, it was a problem. It was really unfortunate it happened. I think we wasted a lot of time and created a lot of heartache for so many people, which was quite unnecessary and uncalled for as far as I'm concerned.
I know, because it was really, like you said, uncalled for. And obviously in 2018, Supreme Court did a U-turn with that, thankfully.
They had to, thank God, or whatever it is that we believe in, that happened.
Yeah. And according to the latest Pew survey, acceptance of homosexuality in India has actually increased to 22% from 2013 to 2019, considered one of the biggest shifts in any of the countries that they surveyed. So what were the tangible, changes that you felt after the 2018 judgment?
Well, for one, the kind of response from corporates has been incredible. This whole thing of looking at diversity and inclusion, because most of these people had a global mandate, but now they were actually willing to follow up on it. I think there was more a sense of ease that they could do something on these issues. The very fact that we had the transgender, the Nasa judgment, that had a role to play also, but only for the transgender community. It very clearly said we will not include the others. But at least for the transgender, without understanding what transgender is, and this confusion between hijras and transgenders in our culture is a big issue. It was reflected in the Nasa judgment.
Yeah, and with their trans rights to, the bill, it showed up in that, yeah.
Yeah. So, however, I think all of these things have made a difference. And we can't, at least I feel now, the only way is the way forward. So if you're saying that trans people should have certain rights, on what basis are you denying those rights to the rest of the community? Because it's our own understanding of what is trans, our own comfort level. We see them as women, maybe. So we're willing to, people have all kinds of arguments for it, right? But my point is, at the end of the day, you are denying rights that people in this country take for granted to a whole set of people. And it doesn't make sense. It really doesn't make sense. Why would you deny the right to marriage? Why would you deny the right to inheritance? Why would you deny the right to surrogacy? Doesn't make sense. And therefore, I think it's just a matter of time, and that also has to change. And the very fact that we are seeing a shift in the way we are looking at homosexuality as a culture is a big step forward, right?
It is.
It's huge. It's huge. So one feels a lot more hopeful now.
True. And not to be considered as criminals simply because who you choose to love. It seems so basic, but...
Yeah. I know, you just wonder, what are people thinking? What is society thinking? What are we doing? It doesn't make sense.
I agree. In fact, one of the interveners, Navtej Singh Johar case, had said that decriminalising homosexuality will open a floodgate of social experiments because our Indian legislature is not equipped to handle that. In fact, now there are 8 petitions going on for the same-sex marriage in our court, which will be heard in December. And funny thing is, in our Indian legal system, marriage it's a very unique case. Marriage, it varies among faiths because there's each law for that, and there's also a secular act under Special Marriage Act. And everything regarding marriage, inheritance, or adoption, or even partner violence, always sees marriage as a male-female pair.
Of course.
Yeah. So what's your take on it? Do you think legalizing same-sex marriage will upset the Indian legal framework and temporarily, like that person said, temporarily upset the, how our personal laws are seen?
I wish this person would have a little bit more of faith in us as a society and as a people. I think I agree at one level that our laws are not gender neutral. And this I'm talking about all our laws. So, for example, if I look at rape, because that is something we have to deal with on a daily basis in our society. Now, are we saying that a man can't rape another man? Because that's what it is. It's only a man can rape. And if you look at even our posh, the Vishaka judgment, in that we are saying only a man can harass a woman. But we know women can harass men.
Yeah.
We know that men can harass men. We know women can harass women. So why are we only limited to this? But that's how the system is, and that's how our thinking is. So unless we start working towards a more gender neutral framework, many people are going to be left out of, they're not going to have the space to be able to get justice.
Yeah.
So we really need to make our laws gender neutral. Otherwise, we are not getting very far.
True. And in fact, just yesterday, a really good ruling came out regarding, it was so nice to hear that regarding, abortion for unmarried women, and talking about marital rape. Justice Chandrasud has said.
Which till now, everyone was very hands off on that. No? So marriage being this really sacrosanct, incredible institution, which as far as I'm concerned is one of the weakest. But yeah, I mean,
it's very patriarchal.
It is so patriarchal. It is so linked. It is so linked to property. If that wasn't there, I think we would have been in a different setup. I don't know when is it that we're going to start really introspecting and looking at what we have become as a culture, as a society. I keep going back to that because to me it is unbelievable. I mean, post-COVID, I just think for the first time, people in a city like Delhi suddenly realized, oh, there are poor people. We don't even see it anymore. We don't see it anymore. So therefore, I think there are things happening. For example, the courts are talking about things like how do we define family? Madras High Court gave us a fantastic judgment on the intersex. They gave a very good ruling on no operations on intersex children till the age of 18.
Yeah, that's a wonderful ruling.
Oh my God, it is out of this world. It is so progressive. It is so needed. And it really needs to be, we need it to be followed in every state in this country. So yeah, there are things happening and our only hope is the courts, unfortunately. And I'm saying unfortunately, not for any other reason, but I don't see much hope in the legislature. That's my problem, is how does one get parliament to, for example, the right to marry? Parliament can take a stand.
Yeah.
Which they not.
But do you feel hopeful with, there have been some favorable rulings like the one with the, marital rape and abortion. Do you feel hopeful that, the legislature will, the legal system will slowly start incorporating gender neutral laws?
I want to say yes, because it's a no-brainer. I can't imagine if our judges can start thinking about these kind of issues, like the judgment we got yesterday on rape. I don't know why we can't extend it to everybody, right? And I can't imagine that they don't see it. So, and it's also, I think, a matter of time. How can we not see it? I mean, we look at POXO, for example, and we do talk about abuse of male children. So it's not like the abuse only happens till the age of 18. So I think it'll happen. It has to happen.
Yeah, hopefully. We're talking about same-sex marriage, Miss Anjali. There's, like I said, there are 8 petitions going on in the, to be heard. And while I was reading up about it, what I came across is marriage is considered an extremely patriarchal institution. And the issues of the queer community often are considered outside of it. In fact, polyamory is often observed in the community. So a lot of people feel same-sex marriage will benefit only the upper caste queer community. And it might exclude other people like, say, trans or NB and intersex people. And it becomes the sole purpose of, they're seen as the sole purpose of queer rights in the country. And it might override issues, more important issues like housing or healthcare, horizontal reservations. Do you think by mimicking heteronormative practice, same-sex marriage ruling might benefit only a few in the community?
Listen, if there is a same-sex marriage ruling, and this is common sense to me, and I'm just saying it as I'm thinking of what you said, it's not going to say that if you're from a certain caste, you can't get married, right?
Yeah.
So if that happens, wonderful. I don't think it's going to exclude it. Right now, the queer community is being excluded.
Yeah.
Right? But if they're given these rights, You're not going to say, okay, for example, Dalit queer people cannot get married. It's not going to happen. And I think it's important that larger coalitions are formed anyway for us to deal with the kind of crisis that we are going through today in our country. We need to form larger coalitions, whether it is with people working on Dalit rights, whether it is with people who are working on land rights, land reform. We need animal rights, the LGBTQI movement. All of us need to come together because otherwise we do not have enough of a voice. It's critical that we come together to work on these issues. But to think that you will exclude some people because certain laws are passed, it depends on how those laws are written up and how they come into existence. And already the trans community has certain benefits thanks to the NALSA judgment, which is not extended to the rest of the community, right? So it's all very well to say these kind of things, but let us just think it through a little bit.
What do you think by focusing on, like, say, same-sex marriages, other more pressing concerns are getting put on hold, like, say, or horizontal reservations?
Why is it one versus another? And apparently marriage seems to be very precious to many people.
And it entitles to a whole bunch of rights as well.
That's it, right? So especially, and in a culture like ours, where marriage seems to be the be-all and end-all of our existence, there are no spaces for single people.
Especially single women.
There are no spaces for divorced people.
Yeah.
Definitely not for women. Given that, again, no-brainer, right? As far as I'm concerned, if you ask me as an individual, I would like to see an overarching non-discriminatory law in place, which means no one can be discriminated on the basis of caste, class, religion. Today, if I want to marry a Muslim man, it's not easy.
Yeah.
It's not going to be easy, right? So I personally would like to see an anti-discriminatory law which encompasses everyone, including the queer community. Society is not doing a favor to them by granting them the rights that anyway should be theirs as citizens of this country.
Yeah. They're entitled to it.
Of course.
And it's, yeah.
All of us are entitled to equal rights. The Constitution is meant for all of us as Indians. So why is it that a whole bunch of Indians are out of the running? It's not making sense, right?
Yeah, that's true. While talking about the recent favorable rulings, like you had mentioned, Madras High Court had come up with quite a few rulings saying issued guidelines for the protection of the LGBTQIA community, told the police not to harass the trans community, and also directed the government to publish a dictionary to use inclusive terms when addressing them. And even the National Medical Commission has banned conversion therapy, which was a huge blessing. So there have been some good rulings in the recent past. But access to healthcare is still a big issue for the queer community, right? In fact, recently, queer folks and people with HIV have protested against the National AIDS Control Organization because they didn't have access to, antiretroviral medicine. So on the ground, what is Naz Foundation struggling with when it comes to healthcare for the community?
See, I think that the issue around healthcare is one of lack of sensitivity on the part of healthcare providers. That's a major issue. The other thing is our healthcare system overall is a very weak system, especially if you're poor. If you have the resources and the money, that's all very well. But if you don't, and you have to access the healthcare system run by the government, it's very difficult. All India Institute, we needed one of our children to be operated, slight ear issue. They've given us a date 3 years from now.
Oh, wow.
For the surgery. Yes. So that's the reality of our healthcare system. They're wonderful. They're overstretched.
My God, okay.
Yeah. But, people wait for years to get appointments. Okay. And that's the reality. So the issue is, how does one even ensure that a space is created for people from the community it's not just the queer community. I'm also talking about the more marginalized communities like sex workers.
Yeah.
It's not easy to go in and as yourself and get those services. And a lot of it has to do with overstretched systems not in place. The healthcare workers are not trained to deal with these communities, which is why we've been saying that, and this is what the Supreme Court also said. that you have to bring about a change in attitudes. And how do you do that? You need to ensure that LGBTQI issues of sex work, all this is part of the curriculum which trains doctors, nurses, teachers, the police, the administrative services. That's when you're going to the IIMs, the IITs.
Yeah.
We need all of this in our school system, in our education system. We need to talk about these issues from the time children are in school. Schools still don't have sex education as part of the curriculum.
Yeah, it doesn't.
So there are certain areas that we are really backward. Are we saying that our young children, there is age appropriate information that has to be shared? I know UNICEF did a study where they found that 80% children in this country are sexually molested or abused. That's a huge number, which means right from the time that child is literally in the womb, you have to start talking to them about sexual abuse.
Yeah.
And there is age appropriate. A 2-year-old can be taught what is a right touch and what is a wrong touch. And yes, obviously, what I'm going to tell a 16-year-old about sex and sexuality, I'm not going to tell a 10-year-old. Yes, there are mechanisms that we can put into place, but we have to be committed to it. We have to make it happen. I know teachers have a hard time because when we do private schools, still invite us to do these sessions, right? And teachers tell us, you all come from outside, so you all can talk about these issues. But we have to see these kids every day. So the level of discomfort, the issue is not the questions the children ask. The issue is the adult who's really uncomfortable about talking about issues of sexuality.
I thought the issue would be is there might be backlash from, the parents or the society. Why are you exposing our children to...
So there is a way of doing it. Whenever I do sessions in schools, I also do a session with the PTA.
Okay.
Where I tell them, this is what I'm going to be doing with your children. And till date, let me tell you my experience. Without fail, parents have said, I wish we had got this information when we were young. So it's not... You have to ally people's fears. You have to engage with people. It's all very well to take a rigid stand and say, no, this. But the point is, look, people are not fools. Parents want the best for their children. But they need to understand, because the fear most adults have is if we talk openly about sexuality with our young people, our young kids, they are going to become sexually promiscuous. But research again has shown us that's not true. Where there is sex education in the school system, STI rates in that age group have come down. Pregnancies have come down. So, there is a way of doing things. But unfortunately, everyone is so panicked and scared and fearful and not trusting of our young people.
True. And it's so heartening to hear that you go to schools and teach the kids, because textbooks still show gender as binary. There's a boy and there's a girl.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we have a long way to go. So, it's like a constant battle. But the only thing is, things are changing. Like one sees it. One sees it in the last 25 years of this work here. The way it was, even the police, the attitude of the police. And, we've been training at least Delhi police for years. And there are lots of changes that happen. I really think there's a lot of hope. It's very easy to feel hopeless. And there are many days that I feel very hopeless. It's not like, but it's not all gloom and doom. And I really think now society has to start thinking about, especially in this age of the internet and the way people meet each other, dating apps, the kind of issues that are coming up. It's not easy. It's not easy. The older generation, we don't know how to deal with it. We are not savvy enough to deal with it. We don't even understand it. And that's all that our young know. How does one strike that balance and I don't have any answers. I'm just saying these are issues that I myself am grappling with. So, and I think this may be true for all parents. Times are not easy.
Like even when I need to talk to my child who's 9 years about, love is not just between a man and a woman. So I always wonder how to explain it in a way that he understands. And in fact, at one time when I was watching something, my child saw, I think, 2 men kissing. And he was a little surprised because I think it's the first time he saw it. And, I had to tell him, okay, it's not just men and women kiss, men and women kiss.
And it's about love. It's about love and caring and relationships, right?
Yeah.
And that it is possible to care, because it's the way we have internalized this also. So to me, the most heartbreaking thing that happens, because I do a lot of counseling still, is to have people say, young men and women say, is there any medicine that will make me feel different?
That's sad.
It's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Imagine what they're going through to feel like that, right? So unless we start looking at same-sex relationships, non-binary relationships as those of love and care, I think we're doing a disservice to love and to caring, and really to make our young people, our young children understand the importance of this. And I must tell you, we run a home for children. I have a whole bunch of children. I'm the mother of some ridiculous number of children.
That's wonderful.
It is very wonderful. And actually during festivals, because Deepavali is coming up, it is such fun, because otherwise families are now just, one or two kids. But here we have 30 children. We have such a bond. But, I remember many years ago this was. Obviously, children learn a lot from what they hear in school. Two of our kids just came in and they threw their bags on that. There was a bench. And then they were talking about someone and said, "Wo to chakka hai." And I just froze. And here I am working on issues of equality and rights. And to hear my children say something like this, and I'm like, what happened? And my immediate response was one of anger. And then I said, for once I was sensible. And I said, okay, maybe that will not do the trick. I need to find a way where they understand why they should not look down on someone. So I had one of my few brilliant moments, and we actually hired a care worker who was from the community.
Okay.
And what do care workers do? They ensure that the kids eat properly. They give them their medicines. They take them to the hospital. If they're sick and admitted in hospital, they sit by their bed. So they do all these things. So then, when we had people from the community as care workers, kids, I never had to ever talk about disrespect to the community with them again. And they're very clear. Today, when they meet someone who's trans, they'll say, "Hum aapko bhaiya bole ya didi." See, that's a huge transformation. And therefore, I think really engaging with children in this way where they can really understand what respect means. And that is something which is a very taught and learned behavior. And a society that is so based on caste and class lines, that is always an issue.
True.
Why is it we see garbage everywhere? Why is it that people in Mercedes Benzes will open a window and throw out a McDonald's packet from there? Why? What is it? What is it about us that we are not being able to get our act together? On this great one, plastic, environment, look at what Chennai has gone through with climate change. What is it that we're not understanding?
Another thing that, quite irritates me about when LGBTQIA issues are talked mostly only about during the Pride month. Why only that month? Why can't it be discussed? Those issues last throughout the year.
Throughout a lifetime. Throughout a lifetime, just like Women's Day is March 8th, and then we forget women.
Yeah. And then it's just forgotten. So one of the biggest complaints is the rainbow washing by corporates. Of course, some argue that, any kind of visibility or someone accepting it is a good thing for the movement. And there have been few companies who have done good things, like say Axis Bank has brought about inclusive policies and Wipro is training their employees to be gender neutral. But from your experience of interacting with people from the community, such inclusive policies like say getting to open a joint bank account, how much does it actually come into the work culture? Does expressing their gender at work slow down their progress?
I think it's a mixed bag. And therefore, it's really important. It's all about bringing about a change in attitudes, because people are still very scared. There are two things here. One is, if my sexuality is disclosed in my workplace, will it affect the way my team leader looks at me or the way I get promoted? All of that, of course, is always an issue. But what is really important is, why do we want people to be open about their sexuality? It should be a matter of choice. Now, we are not telling people who are heterosexual to stand on rooftops and declare their sexuality. We're not telling them that. But we expect gay people to talk about their sexuality. My point is this. It's very simple. You create an environment. If they want to be open about their sexuality, please create an environment which is inclusive and is not violent in any way. And if people want, they can disclose the sexuality, but you are interested in their work or their sexuality. And of course, I think it's very nice to be in a workplace where you're so comfortable you can be who you are. Because then you give so much more of yourself to your work. So companies actually benefit from creating such an environment.
When they don't feel that fear that, oh, someone might catch them or, they might get caught. Yeah.
Or there are consequences.
Yeah.
More than anything else, there are consequences to being who you are. It's not an easy one. And look at everything. Look, we live in a predominantly heterosexual world. So there was one company where I had gone to do some workshops, and there they were so wanting to be inclusive. However, they had one day where all families are invited to come to for a party or whatever, and in which it said you and your spouse and your children. So suppose I'm gay and I would like to bring my partner. How do I do that? Right? So when we think about these issues, they're small things, but that's where we can make these changes.
I want to talk about the political climate a little bit. The sense right now, I know the center has openly opposed, for instance, the same-sex marriage. It's always stayed away from any political party, stayed away from queer issues. There are hardly any policies in their parties. But like how minorities need representation, don't you think queer people also should have some kind of political representation so that they can bring about systemic changes?
In the ideal world.
Yeah, in the ideal world. Do you foresee, how can queer people start to have a political voice? Realistically speaking, do you think it's possible for them to be part of politics?
Of course it's possible. But please create the environment for it to be possible.
Yeah, right now they're just allies for them, but
look at the climate today. It's very difficult. It's not like there are no queer politicians. They're there. If we don't talk about it, they can't talk about it.
Right.
But it's all about ensuring there are laws in place to protect people, laws which will allow for their acceptance. You still have some amount of transgender representation, very rare.
Yeah, little bit.
1 or 2 here or there, but it's there. It's starting to happen. But the rest of the community, no, because just look at the climate, just look at the laws, just look at the attitude. How on God's earth is someone who is gay? How are they going to take that kind of a public stand? And you have gay people across the board. You have lawyers who are gay, you have architects who are gay, you have film stars who are gay, you have all kinds of business people who are gay. They're across the board. Yeah, they're part of society. They're not coming from another planet, no? So unless we, as a society, make a commitment to be respectful and create an environment which is nurturing and will not scare people, that's when you'll see something like that happen. But I think we need strong laws. To me, that is critical. I'm not saying that is the only thing, but I think it's very important because that is something you can fall back on. We have a strong anti-dowry law in place. Today, it's not like dowries have stopped. But they've definitely, I remember when I was in college, centuries ago, but at that time, every second day we would hear of women being burnt for dowry.
Really?
Yes. When I was in college in the 70s.
That's so sad.
Burning to death was one of the most common things that happened for dowry. So therefore, that seems to have come down a lot. But dowry is still happening. They're finding other ways to torture. All of that is still barkarar. Some change happens. Sati, when I was reading about Sati, when you read about Sati, you can't imagine, in northern India, you can't imagine that we could have ever gotten rid of it. It was such an integral part of who we were. The very fact that it doesn't happen anymore is huge. And that's what gives me a lot of hope. That's why I think laws are very critical. Strong laws which protect rights, which protect individuals.
Right. But talking about discrimination, do you think queer women often get discriminated more even within the community? They're often fetishized.
Listen, women's sexuality is problematic.
Yeah.
We don't talk about it, right? And nothing challenges patriarchy more than a woman saying, I want to live with another woman, I love another woman, I don't need a man. That somehow gets everyone all riled up. So definitely, if you are a lesbian or a bisexual woman, it's very difficult. Also, I think culturally, there is an acceptance of male homosexuality in our culture, as long as we don't make it an issue of rights. And the reason I say this is I do a lot of counseling of families. 9.5 out of 10 families will tell me, yes, yes, I accept it, because it's usually men who are better. Yes, yes, we will accept after 3-4 hours of convincing them. We accept that he's like this. But what's the problem? Tell him to get married. So I'm going, but he doesn't want to get married. He has to get married, he has to have a child. And then what he does in his own time, who's going to question? So I'm like, but what about his wife? She'll be happy, she'll be with us, she'll have a child. What more does she want? It kind of dovetails into how we see women and women's sexuality.
Yeah.
Right? And also, why is it that a lot of people end up getting married? Another thing, I do a lot of work on sexuality across the board with people. And this is a question I've asked everybody, every group I've worked. And the answer across has been, no, the family name has to continue.
That's a big thing.
How will we live in society without being married? Who will look after me in my old age? Who will look after my parents? I'm saying, okay, I did hear Eamon say love. But we as a culture, as a society, are very good at one thing, including me. All of us live double lives. We live one life for society and one for ourselves. I think it's in our DNA. So we have a lot of work to do.
Yes, long way to go.
A long way to go, as the bishop said to the actress.
On a last note, Ms. Anjali, I know the next generation will continue to take the work of Naz Foundation forward. What struggles do you foresee for them?
Well, I think the battle now is going to be a long. But I have great faith in them, because I think they have a lot more courage than my generation did. I think they're lucky in being able to access information in ways that we never did and never could. I also think they are a lot more tolerant and less judgmental than we were. So I have great faith that things will only get better.
There's just one point I would like to disagree with you, that they are more courageous than you. I think you're a very courageous woman. You started solely a movement when there was none. And back in the 90s, you brought about, and, I think you were like the torchbearer for the community. So, and the things you have done over the years, you've tirelessly worked, and it's so nice to see all the accolades that you have received. And it's so wonderful and an honor to talk to someone like you.
Thank you so much. I hope this world will become a better place. That's my biggest dream and hope for ourselves as a society.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Ms. Anjali.
Thanks. Take care.
I hope you enjoyed this conversation. If you have any queries or feedback, you can reach me at maharanitalks@gmail.com or at Maharani Talks on Instagram. Take care.